They believed the funeral was the end of her story, but it was only the moment justice began looking for her. The last hymn had faded into the chilly October air as mourners quietly drifted away from the hillside cemetery overlooking Lake Michigan. Fresh white roses rested against the polished granite headstone that now bore Michael Brooks's name, while gray clouds stretched across the Chicago skyline like a heavy curtain refusing to lift. Danielle Brooks remained standing beside the grave long after everyone else had turned away, her gloved fingers gently tracing the simple gold wedding band that still rested on her left hand. 12 years of marriage had disappeared beneath 6 feet of earth, yet she could still hear Michael's voice reminding her that love was never measured by how long life lasted, but by how faithfully two people walked through it together. She whispered a final goodbye, took one slow breath, and prepared to leave with nothing more than a small wooden keepsake box filled with handwritten anniversary cards, family photographs, and Michael's favorite wristwatch. Before she could take another step, her father-in-law blocked her path with the confidence of a man who believed the day belonged to him. Standing beside him were Michael's older brother, his mother, and the family's longtime attorney, each dressed in flawless black coats that looked untouched by grief. The attorney opened a leather portfolio and removed several neatly prepared documents. "Mrs. Brooks," he said in a polished professional tone, "before you leave, we need your signature to complete several estate matters." Danielle accepted the papers without suspicion, expecting routine funeral documents or insurance forms. Instead, every page demanded that she surrender every legal interest connected to Michael's estate. Their home overlooking the lake, their retirement accounts, the small lakeside cottage where Michael had proposed. Even personal belongings acquired during their marriage were listed for immediate transfer to the Brooks Family Trust. Danielle looked up slowly, convinced there had to be a mistake. "Michael would never have asked me to sign this today," she said. Quietly, her mother-in-law answered with a cold smile that carried no comfort. "Michael is no longer here to make decisions. We are." Michael's brother folded his arms. "The Brooks legacy belongs with the Brooks family." Danielle looked down at the papers again, her heart refusing to accept what her eyes had just read. She remembered every hospital visit, every sleepless night, every prayer whispered beside Michael's bed, and every promise they had made to face life together no matter how difficult the road became. None of those memories appeared anywhere inside the legal language spread before her. Only numbers, property descriptions, and signature lines remained. "Please sign," the attorney said, extending a silver pen. Danielle reached toward it, not because she agreed, but because exhaustion had nearly emptied her of the strength to fight another battle. Then a calm voice drifted across the quiet cemetery. "Do not let her sign." Every head turned at once. Near the wrought iron entrance stood a tall man wearing a charcoal overcoat beside a black Rolls-Royce, his posture perfectly composed despite the brisk wind sweeping across the hill. His pale face revealed almost nothing, yet his steady blue eyes never left Danielle for a single moment. No one had noticed him arrive. No one greeted him. Even so, the confidence on the faces of the Brooks family vanished almost instantly. The attorney slowly lowered his pen. Michael's father stiffened without speaking. Danielle had never seen the stranger before, but something about the quiet authority surrounding him made the entire cemetery feel different, as though every promise buried beneath the fresh soil had suddenly found someone determined to keep it alive. 18 months earlier, before silence settled over the Brooks estate, and before grief found its permanent place inside Danielle Brooks's heart, every morning began with the same quiet promise. She would help her husband greet another day with hope, no matter how uncertain tomorrow appeared. The mansion overlooking Lake Michigan was magnificent by every standard, with polished marble floors, towering windows, and carefully landscaped gardens stretching toward the shoreline. Yet none of those luxuries mattered inside the master bedroom, where Michael Brooks now spent most of his time. His illness had slowly stolen his strength, but it had never taken away the warmth in his smile whenever Danielle entered the room carrying breakfast on a wooden tray or opened the curtains just enough to let the soft morning light reach his favorite chair. Danielle had quietly placed her own career on hold without a single complaint. She learned every medication schedule, attended every appointment, and filled an old leather notebook with careful notes after each conversation with his physicians. Every afternoon, she prepared meals designed to meet his changing nutritional needs, even if it meant spending hours perfecting recipes he could comfortably enjoy. Every evening, she read aloud from the novels they had once enjoyed together during summer vacations at their small lakeside cottage. Michael often apologized for the life she had given up to care for him, but Danielle always answered the same way. Love is not measured by the easy days. It is measured by the days we refuse to walk away. Michael never forgot those words. While Danielle devoted herself completely to her husband, the rest of the Brooks family gradually became strangers inside their own home. Business meetings seemed more important than family dinners. Phone calls replaced personal visits, and eventually even those became rare. The grand dining room remained beautifully prepared every evening. Yet Michael's chair stayed empty, while conversations downstairs revolved around investments, board appointments, and future expansion plans. Danielle noticed the distance growing wider each week, but she refused to let resentment enter the room where Michael rested. She believed peace was the greatest gift she could still offer him. One rainy afternoon, while watching gentle waves roll across the gray waters beyond the bedroom windows, Michael reached into the bedside drawer and removed an old photograph showing two young men standing shoulder to shoulder beside a fishing boat, both smiling as though the world held nothing but endless possibilities. His name is William Castellano. Michael said quietly, "When we were younger, he taught me that loyalty always reveals itself when life becomes difficult." Danielle studied the faded photograph before handing it back. "Do you still see him?" Michael smiled faintly. "Not often. Life took us in different directions. But if there is one person who always keeps his word, it is William." Danielle simply nodded, believing it was another cherished memory from happier years. She could not know that those few sentences would soon become the foundation of everything that followed. Outside the bedroom, elegant hallways echoed with footsteps that rarely stopped at Michael's door anymore. Behind closed office doors, legal folders quietly appeared beside financial reports, and conversations ended whenever Danielle walked nearby. She never questioned any of it. Her attention remained fixed on the man she loved, believing that kindness required no audience and devotion needed no reward. She did not realize that while she spent every hour protecting Michael's final days with compassion, someone else had already begun protecting the promise that would one day protect her. As autumn slowly surrendered to winter, the rhythm inside the Brooks estate changed in ways that Danielle could feel but could not yet explain. Michael's condition remained stable enough for quiet conversations, afternoon chess games, and short walks across the sunroom whenever he felt strong enough. Yet the atmosphere beyond his bedroom seemed to grow colder with each passing week. Visitors no longer arrived carrying flowers or asking about his recovery. Instead, expensive sedans pulled into the circular driveway at carefully scheduled hours, delivering accountants, financial consultants, and attorneys who disappeared into Michael's father's private office before leaving with thick folders tucked beneath their arms. Whenever Danielle politely offered coffee or asked whether Michael should be included in the discussions, she received the same courteous smile followed by the same carefully rehearsed answer. "These are routine business matters. Michael should focus on resting." She accepted those explanations because she believed families deserved trust during difficult seasons, but Michael noticed the concern hidden behind her gentle smile. One quiet evening, while snow drifted softly beyond the windows, he reached for her hand and asked, "Have they been meeting downstairs again?" Danielle hesitated for only a moment before answering honestly, "Almost every day." Michael stared toward the fireplace, his expression thoughtful rather than surprised. "Then they have started earlier than I expected." Danielle looked at him with quiet confusion. "Started what?" Michael squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Nothing you need to worry about tonight." He changed the subject before she could ask another question, asking instead whether she would read another chapter from his favorite novel. Danielle smiled and opened the well-worn book, believing he simply wished to protect her from unnecessary stress. She never realized that Michael had already begun recognizing the distance growing between himself and the family business that had carried his last name for generations. Downstairs, conversations became increasingly confidential. Estate valuations replaced holiday planning. Trust agreements replaced family dinners. Every document seemed to revolve around preserving the Brooks legacy, Yet no one ever invited the person who had faithfully stood beside Michael through every hospital visit and every sleepless night. Danielle remained invisible to discussions that quietly shaped her future. Even longtime household employees noticed the change. Margaret, the housekeeper who had served the family for more than 20 years, gently warned Danielle one afternoon that unusual requests had been made regarding storage rooms, personal records, and archived family files. Danielle thanked her but dismissed the concern with the same kindness that guided every decision she made. "There has to be a reasonable explanation," she said. "Families sometimes handle difficult moments differently." Margaret nodded politely, although worry remained written across her face. A few days later, Danielle entered Michael's study searching for one of his medical folders and found him sitting alone beside the window with several sealed envelopes spread neatly across his desk. He quickly covered them with another file before smiling warmly. "Almost caught me organizing old papers," he joked. Danielle laughed softly and kissed his forehead, never questioning the moment. After she left, Michael carefully looked at the envelope resting on top of the stack. Written across the front in his own handwriting were only 5 simple words. "To William, if necessary." He quietly sealed the envelope once more and placed it inside the locked drawer of his desk, hoping with all his heart that it would never need to be opened, unaware that events already unfolding beneath his own roof would soon make that impossible to avoid. 3 weeks before Michael passed away, an unfamiliar black sedan rolled quietly through the front gates of the Brooks estate just after sunrise, arriving so early that even the household staff had barely begun preparing breakfast. Danielle happened to notice the vehicle from the kitchen window while pouring fresh coffee, but she assumed it belonged to another physician or business associate. Instead, a tall man stepped out wearing a charcoal overcoat and carrying nothing except a weathered leather portfolio. His movements were calm, deliberate, and almost effortless, as though he had walked through places far more intimidating than the grand entrance before him. Margaret greeted him with visible surprise before immediately leading him upstairs without asking for identification. Danielle found the moment unusual because visitors normally waited in the sitting room until Michael approved the meeting, yet this guest was welcomed as though the house itself already knew his name. Curious but respectful, Danielle remained downstairs arranging Michael's morning medication while quiet footsteps disappeared along the second-floor hallway. Nearly an hour passed before Michael finally asked for Danielle to bring tea to his study instead of the bedroom. When she entered carrying the tray, she found the stranger standing beside the large window overlooking the lake, while Michael sat comfortably in his favorite chair, looking more peaceful than she had seen him in months. Their conversation stopped the moment she entered, replaced by warm smiles that immediately softened the room. Michael introduced the visitor simply. "Danielle, this is William Castellano. We have been friends for longer than either of us would like to admit." William offered a polite handshake, his expression reserved yet unexpectedly kind. "Michael has spent many years telling me about your strength," he said. Danielle smiled modestly, believing he was simply trying to encourage a family facing difficult days. "He gives me far too much credit," she replied. William glanced briefly toward Michael before answering. "No, I believe he does not give you enough." The conversation drifted toward old memories from college, fishing trips along Lake Michigan, and youthful dreams that had taken both men in very different directions. Danielle quietly excused herself, leaving them to continue their reunion, unaware that Michael watched the study door until it gently closed behind her. Only then did his smile slowly fade. He reached into the desk drawer and removed the sealed envelope Danielle had unknowingly seen days earlier. Sliding it across the polished wood, he looked directly into William's eyes. "If everything happens the way I fear it will, she will stand alone." William rested one hand on the envelope but did not open it. "Have you told her?" Michael slowly shook his head. "She has already carried enough burdens. I want her last memories with me to be peaceful, not filled with suspicion." A long silence settled between the two lifelong friends before William finally spoke. "What exactly are you asking of me?" Michael turned toward the lake, watching winter sunlight shimmer across the water. "I am asking you for something I would never ask of anyone else. If I cannot protect Danielle anymore, promise me that you will." William never looked away from him. There was no dramatic speech, no hesitation, and no negotiation. He simply nodded once with absolute certainty. You have my word. Michael closed his eyes for a brief moment, releasing a quiet breath that sounded almost like relief. Outside the study, Danielle continued preparing lunch, completely unaware that while she measured soup into a small porcelain bowl, the future of her life had just been entrusted to a promise between two men who believed that loyalty was worth more than every fortune the Brooks family possessed. The memory dissolved like morning fog, and Danielle suddenly found herself standing once again beneath the gray October sky, the unsigned documents trembling slightly in her hands as every eye in the cemetery shifted toward William Castellano. No one spoke for several long seconds. Even the wind seemed to lose its voice. William walked forward with measured confidence until he stopped a few feet from Danielle, never once acknowledging the Brooks family before gently taking the folder from her hands. He flipped through each page without haste, reading every paragraph with the careful attention of a man who understood that lives could be changed by a single sentence hidden inside legal language. The family's attorney finally broke the silence. "Sir, these are private estate documents. They do not concern you." William calmly turned another page before answering. "If they require the signature of Michael Brooks's lawful wife on the day of his funeral, they concern me." His quiet reply carried more authority than anyone expected. Michael's father stepped forward with restrained frustration. "This is a family matter." William slowly looked up for the first time, his blue eyes steady and unreadable. "That is precisely why I am here." Danielle remained frozen beside them, still trying to understand why a man she had met only once months earlier had appeared at the exact moment she needed someone to question what everyone else accepted without hesitation. William removed a pair of reading glasses from his coat pocket and continued reviewing the documents. Then he stopped. His fingers rested on one paragraph for several seconds before he looked toward the attorney again. "Interesting." The attorney attempted a polite smile. "Is there a problem?" William gently tapped the page. "This declaration states that Michael Brooks personally affirmed these estate transfer instructions during his final week." "That is correct," the attorney replied confidently. William nodded almost imperceptibly, before asking another question. "Which day?" The attorney answered without hesitation, giving the specific date. William remained completely still. "You are certain?" "Absolutely." William quietly closed the folder and handed it back to the attorney. "Then I believe we have our first inconsistency." Confusion spread across every face. Michael's brother frowned. "What inconsistency?" William folded his hands behind his back. On that exact date, Michael was under continuous medical supervision with documented restrictions preventing him from participating in lengthy legal consultations. His attending physician limited all meetings because extended discussions placed unnecessary strain on his condition. The attorney immediately responded, "We have signed certifications." William did not argue. Instead, he reached inside his overcoat and removed a slim envelope bearing the logo of the medical center where Michael had received treatment. "So do I." Danielle stared at the envelope, remembering the countless appointments she had attended, every medication adjustment she had carefully recorded, every conversation with physicians who had insisted Michael needed peace rather than paperwork. William continued speaking with remarkable composure. "I am not accusing anyone of wrongdoing today. I am only saying that before a grieving widow signs away her legal rights, every statement contained in these documents deserves to be examined against verified records." The cemetery remained silent. Even the attorney seemed uncertain for the first time. Danielle looked from William to the Brooks family, realizing that the certainty they had displayed only moments earlier was beginning to disappear. Somewhere beneath the fresh flowers covering Michael's grave rested a promise made between two lifelong friends, and for the very first time since losing her husband, Danielle sensed that someone intended to honor it exactly as it had been given. No one reached for another document after that. The confidence that had surrounded the Brooks family only moments earlier gave way to uneasy silence as mourners lingering near the cemetery gates slowed their steps, sensing that something far more important than a funeral was unfolding before them. William carefully unfolded the medical letter and handed it to the attorney without the slightest trace of triumph. "This is not a conclusion," he said calmly. "It is simply the beginning of the truth." The attorney accepted the document, scanning each line with growing uncertainty. It confirmed that during the period in question, Michael's physicians had restricted extended legal meetings and required detailed records for every visitor entering his private room. Michael's brother immediately attempted to regain control of the conversation. Medical recommendations do not prevent someone from signing papers. William acknowledged the point with a slight nod. Correct. Which is why I did not stop with medical records. He reached into his portfolio once again and removed another thin folder. The estate's security office maintained electronic visitor logs for every arrival and departure at the residence. Those records are preserved automatically and cannot be altered without creating a permanent audit trail. Danielle looked at the folder in surprise. She remembered greeting nurses, physicians, and therapists almost every day, yet she had never considered that every visitor had also been documented by the estate's security system. William opened the file to a specific page. According to these records, no attorney entered the property on the afternoon you claim these instructions were reviewed with Michael. The attorney frowned. Perhaps the meeting occurred on another day. William's expression remained unchanged. A few moments ago, you stated you were absolutely certain of the date. Another heavy silence settled over the cemetery. Michael's father looked toward the attorney, waiting for an explanation that never seemed to come. Danielle lowered her eyes, remembering countless afternoons spent beside Michael's bed while reading novels, organizing medication, or simply sitting together in comfortable silence. She could account for nearly every hour of those final weeks because she had rarely left his side. The possibility that someone had reconstructed those days differently sent a quiet chill through her heart. William continued speaking with the same steady composure. There is another question that deserves an answer before any signature is requested today. If these documents truly reflected Michael's final wishes, where is the original estate file that should accompany them? The attorney hesitated. It is being processed. By whom? William asked. Our office. Then producing it should not be difficult. No reply followed. Even the autumn wind seemed to pause between the rows of white headstones. Margaret, who had quietly attended the funeral from a respectful distance, watched with tears forming in her eyes as Danielle stood alone, holding nothing except the small wooden keepsake box that contained the only possessions she had believed still belonged to her. William noticed the box for the first time and recognized Michael's worn wristwatch resting inside, beside a stack of handwritten anniversary cards. For a brief moment, his composed expression softened with unmistakable sadness before returning to quiet determination. Michael once told me that paper can be rewritten, he said softly, looking toward the fresh grave. Character cannot. He turned back to the attorney. Until every original record is produced and independently verified, Danielle Brooks will not sign a single page. No one challenged him. Instead, every face slowly turned toward the cemetery entrance as another dark sedan rolled through the gates, its arrival carrying the quiet weight of someone who had been expected by only one man standing among them. The second sedan came to a gentle stop near the cemetery entrance, and an older gentleman stepped out carrying a slim black document case held carefully against his side, as though what rested inside mattered more than anything else he owned. His silver hair moved lightly in the autumn breeze, and his measured pace reflected neither urgency nor hesitation. William watched him approach with quiet confidence before extending a hand in greeting. Thank you for coming, Richard. Danielle recognized the name immediately. Richard Hale had served as Michael's personal financial advisor for nearly 2 decades, a man Michael often described as careful enough to read every line twice before signing his own name. Richard returned William's handshake, then turned toward Danielle with genuine sympathy. Mrs. Brooks, I wish we were meeting under different circumstances. She thanked him softly, still struggling to understand why another trusted figure from Michael's past had suddenly appeared at the cemetery. Richard looked toward the Brooks family before opening his document case with deliberate care. Several months ago, Michael instructed me that if any questions ever arose concerning his estate, I was to deliver this personally. He removed a sealed envelope bearing the embossed insignia of the law firm that had managed Michael's private affairs for years. Across the seal appeared Michael's unmistakable signature, written in the same steady handwriting Danielle had seen on every anniversary card he had ever given her. A quiet murmur spread among the remaining mourners. Michael's father stepped forward. What exactly is that? Richard answered calmly. A certified duplicate of the final estate instructions deposited under legal custody before Michael's health declined further. The family attorney immediately objected. Only the original controls the estate. Richard nodded politely. That is correct, which is precisely why this document includes the chain of custody identifying where the original has been secured since the day it was executed. William accepted the envelope but did not open it immediately. Instead, he held it where everyone could clearly see the unbroken seal. No one standing here, he said quietly, needs to rely on assumptions any longer. Danielle felt her heart begin to race. Every conversation with Michael during those final months returned to her in scattered memories. His unexpected questions about loyalty, the mysterious visit from William, the sealed envelopes she had never asked about. Suddenly, they no longer felt like unrelated moments, but pieces of a single promise carefully prepared long before today. Richard removed another document from his case. This certification also confirms that Michael requested independent witnesses during the execution of his final instructions, along with video verification maintained under legal archive. The attorney lowered his eyes toward the ground, saying nothing. Michael's brother looked from Richard to William with growing disbelief, as though certainty itself had begun slipping beyond his reach. William finally broke the seal with careful hands and unfolded the first page. He read silently for several moments before looking toward Danielle, his expression carrying neither victory nor surprise, only quiet respect. Michael anticipated that today might happen, he said. Danielle felt tears gathering despite every effort to remain composed. He knew, she whispered. William nodded gently. He hoped he was wrong. Richard closed his document case and looked toward the gray sky above the hillside cemetery. The complete contents should be read through the proper legal process, he said. But one sentence deserves to be heard now because Michael insisted that it never be hidden. William lowered his eyes to the page and prepared to read aloud the words his oldest friend had written long before anyone standing there realized how desperately they would one day matter. William held the document with both hands, allowing another moment of silence to settle over the cemetery before his calm voice finally broke the stillness. If these words are being read because I am no longer beside my wife, then let there be no uncertainty about the decision I made while my mind was clear and my heart was at peace. Danielle closed her eyes as the familiar rhythm of Michael's writing seemed almost to bring him back into the autumn air. William continued reading. To my beloved Danielle, you stood beside me through every difficult morning, every sleepless night, and every moment when hope seemed smaller than fear. You never measured my worth by my strength, my success, or my future. You simply loved me. Everything I built during my lifetime became meaningful because I was fortunate enough to share it with you. Therefore, I leave my entire personal estate, including our home, our investments, our lakeside cottage, and every asset under my sole authority, to my wife, Danielle Brooks, trusting that she will always use them with the same kindness she showed me every day. A quiet gasp passed through the small group of mourners. Danielle pressed one trembling hand against her lips as tears slowly escaped despite every attempt to remain composed. William lowered the document briefly before continuing with the next paragraph. I also ask that my lifelong friend, William Castellano, ensure these wishes are honored exactly as written should any confusion or disagreement arise after my passing. I trust his judgment because loyalty has never failed him, and it never failed me. William stopped reading and gently folded the page. No expression of triumph crossed his face. Instead, there was only the quiet weight of a promise finally fulfilled. Richard stepped forward and spoke with the calm precision that had defined his entire career. The certification accompanying this document confirms that the original remains secured under probate supervision and has not been altered since the day Michael executed it before independent witnesses. The legal process will verify every page, but there is no longer any legitimate question regarding his intentions. The attorney slowly removed his glasses and looked down without speaking. Michael's father seemed suddenly years older, while his brother stared toward the fresh headstone as though hoping the stone itself might contradict the words they had just heard. No contradiction came. Only silence remained. Danielle looked at William with quiet disbelief. He trusted you with all of this. William nodded gently. He trusted you first. I simply promised that no one would take away what he freely chose to give. Danielle lowered her eyes toward the small wooden keepsake box she still carried. Inside rested Michael's watch beside the handwritten anniversary cards he had saved for every year of their marriage. For the first time since the funeral began, she realized those simple treasures had never been the only inheritance he intended to leave behind. He had also left her his confidence, his gratitude, and the certainty that she had never been invisible in his life, no matter how anyone else chose to see her. The gray clouds above the cemetery slowly began to separate, allowing a narrow ribbon of warm afternoon sunlight to fall across the polished granite bearing Michael's name. William quietly slipped the folded document back into its protective envelope before looking toward Danielle one final time. "Your husband spent his final months preparing for this moment," he said softly. "Not because he expected the worst from you, but because he hoped the truth would always find you, even after he no longer could." In the weeks that followed, the quiet certainty Michael had carefully prepared became impossible to ignore. The probate court confirmed the authenticity of the original estate documents exactly as Richard had described, and every certified record matched the duplicate William had protected. The Brooks family's attempt to persuade Danielle to surrender her legal rights ended not with dramatic confrontation, but with simple acknowledgement that Michael's final wishes were unmistakably clear. The lakefront home remained hers. The lakeside cottage where their happiest summers had unfolded remained hers. Every investment, every personal account, and every possession Michael had specifically entrusted to her was transferred according to the instructions he had signed while surrounded by independent witnesses. Danielle attended each legal appointment with the same quiet dignity she had shown throughout Michael's illness, never speaking with bitterness and never seeking revenge against those who had underestimated her. She answered every question honestly, thanked every professional who fulfilled their responsibilities, and allowed the truth to accomplish what anger never could. Even those who had once doubted her found themselves unable to question the grace with which she carried both grief and unexpected responsibility. Several months later, on a calm spring morning, Danielle returned alone to the cemetery overlooking Lake Michigan. The cold gray skies of autumn had been replaced by clear blue light, and gentle breezes carried the scent of fresh blossoms across the hillside. She placed a small bouquet of white lilies beside Michael's headstone before removing his old wristwatch from the keepsake box she still carried everywhere. Holding it carefully in her hands, she smiled through quiet tears. "You kept your promise," she whispered. And so did he. Soft footsteps approached across the grass. William stopped several feet away, respectfully allowing her private moment to finish before speaking. "Richard finalized the last documents yesterday," he said. "Everything is exactly as Michael intended." Danielle thanked him with sincere gratitude. "I still do not know how I can ever repay what you have done." William looked toward the lake where sunlight shimmered across the calm water exactly as it had on the morning Michael entrusted him with a single promise. "You already have," he replied. Danielle looked at him with quiet curiosity. William smiled gently. "By proving that Michael was right about you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to defend, nothing left to prove, and nothing left to fear. The promise had reached its destination. Before leaving, William reached into his overcoat and handed Danielle one final envelope. "Michael asked me to give you this only after everything was settled." She carefully opened it after William had quietly walked away. Inside rested a handwritten note in Michael's familiar script. "My love, if you are reading this, then someone kept their word when I no longer could. Never measure your worth by what others try to take from you. Measure it by the kindness you refuse to surrender. That is the greatest inheritance either of us will ever leave behind." Danielle folded the letter against her heart and looked across the peaceful cemetery, where loss no longer felt like the end of her story, but the beginning of a life built upon love, loyalty, and truth. In the distance, William's black Rolls-Royce disappeared beyond the cemetery gates without ceremony or applause, leaving behind only the quiet evidence that real strength does not always announce itself. Sometimes it simply arrives, keeps a promise, and leaves the world a little more just than it found it. And on that day, the world remembered what dignity looks like.